Also going to try and get in a legal voice as well. Mr. Swapnil Kothari is also with us. I'm sorry, Ananya, I had to cut you short. Mr. Kothari, there are two things over here. One, of course, everyone is reading this as a huge shot in the arm for the ED and to the government's arguments as well. And the second, of course, is those data which is out, which says that the conviction rate in the ED investigations have been very low, which has often given rise to this counter-argument from the opposition parties, is that how ED is actually being misused, politically speaking. Your thoughts on that?
Let me tell you something. The opposition always seems to have some sort of a rankle with the powers of the Enforcement Directorate, especially when they come under the scanner. And that is very natural for anybody to say that, the ED is acting at the hands of the ruling dispensation and there's a witch hunt, it's a political rivalry, all of those things. But if you've noticed, the judgment of the Supreme Court clearly validates the entire provisions of the PMLA, the provisos which were challenged. And also it ensures that the Enforcement Directorate as a central investigating agency does not have its hands, tightened or in any way shackled to ensure that the criminals are caught within its net, especially because money laundering is a huge, huge scam. And this is something which they need to ensure that the Enforcement Directorate has powers within itself or under its in its hand to go by the act, to go by the statute without fear or favor. So what is more important from flowing out from this judgment is that it is a validation from the top court, especially to the central investigating agencies, that yes, you have the power. Of course, you shall utilize the same sparingly, because you need to have a reason to believe, and a reason to believe means a legitimate reason to believe. And also at the same time, you need to have material evidence on record before you go and arrest someone. And especially at the deputy director level, obviously people who are occupying those positions are not somebody who act on whims and arbitrariness, and it should they do, because no system is foolproof. So obviously, if there are fault lines, if there are people who are compromised, then the Supreme Court is there to take care of them at the same time, and also of the victims who have suffered at their hands unjudiciously.
Mr. Kothari, if you just hold on, my colleague from the Supreme Court, Ananya, also wants to join in. Ananya, go ahead. You have a question for Mr. Kothari.
Mr. Kothari, taking the discussion on conviction rate forward, I remember that Solicitor General Tushar Mehta, when he was arguing this particular matter, had said that 4,700 cases have only been registered, while there have been around 33,000 offences, predicate offences that have taken place. So do you not think that this is something that is a very, very legally tenable argument? And in fact, he had also argued that around 98,000 crores of proceeds of crime has been in fact confiscated. However, the confirmation has come in on a pretty lesser amount. But then don't you think that this is something that gives ED a special statute, that gives ED a better chance as an investigation agency, Mr. Kothari?
Well, Ananya, it definitely does. And, Tushar Mehta, obviously speaking for the government and speaking for the investigating agency, is going to, give you a separate picture, which he is doing. He's saying that, there is much, much more at hand and much, much more, nonsense that is going on in terms of money laundering. But, only 4,700 cases or so have been registered. So it's not that the ED is arresting people left, right and center.
Mr. Kothari, I'm sorry, but we also have the BJP spokesperson Nalin Kohli joining us. Nalin, every time ED questions someone from the opposition says, there you have it. The centre has used and misused the ED and the CBI for its own purposes. Today, what the Supreme Court says, you think that should kind of silence them? You think so?
Well, certainly it would bring closure to an unending round of criticism against the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, which had been challenged. And once a three-judge bench has ruled on it, you will, of course, note that I have still not had the time to have seen the judgment itself, but what one gathers from the media, it has basically upheld the provisions that were under challenge in terms of definitions, in terms of applicability, the powers of arrest, Section 24 dealing with the reverse burden of proof issue. So it, of course, will silence it out. The Prevention of Money Laundering Act is an act with a specific purpose. It's an act to obviously prevent money laundering and proceeds of crime. Now, the opposition party may feel aggrieved with the fact that the Enforcement Directorate is taking action against certain set of people, and they are from the opposition parties. But in each one of those set of cases, there is ample showing there that there prima facie exists a case. You don't need even a trial for it. If 20 crores are found in the house of Partho Chatterjee's associate in a scam that is being seen by the Honorable High Court of Calcutta, I mean, do you really need a full trial to say that something is prima facie wrong and it's justified that money laundering should go on there? I mean, 20 crores is not a small sum of money. Even a crore of rupees for that matter of fact. So
but you know, Nalin, Nalin, the other side, which even Ananya was pointing out, is the rate of convictions as far as the ED investigations go have also not been very high. So this also strengthens the counter argument is that you have those investigations, tariq pe tariq, but nothing comes out of it.
So therefore, I'll give you a counter argument, and as a practicing lawyer, we face it in the courts. In civil law, it may be matters of commercial dispute, family dispute, it may be property-related matters. The actual judgment may come after a period of 10, 15, 20, 30, even 40 years. Now, that's for a separate set of reasons. So just because you don't have finality or closure, in this case being the conviction, you can't say that the act itself is bad. That is also the process of which requires a larger discussion. It requires many reasons to it. It requires in terms of how evidence is taken, how cross-examination takes place, how adjournments happen. There's a whole set of stories there. So that cannot be the argument whether the act itself is right or wrong. The act has to be seen within the corners of the Constitution. The act has to be seen whether it fits in the mandate. I mean, whether the judicial challenge to the act sees reason to interfere with the act or not. So obviously what's being reported is that this challenge has not succeeded because the court has broadly found that the act per se is okay. Now, anyone who gives a statement also in terms of an investigation under the PMLA or any act has every right to challenge that in the trial process that thereafter begins. So, you know, there is a provision for everyone to protect their rights. But the removal of the act on grounds which are more in the nature of criticisms born out of personal anguish is not the way the court would look at it. The court would look at it whether the act itself is constitutionally correct, it meets its stated objectives, which is why an act is passed, and whether the circumstances around it also in each individual case are justifying the use of that provision or not.
Okay. Fair enough. You know, Mr. Kothari, just listening to what Mr. Kohli had to say and the arguments which are also coming in from the Supreme Court as well, well, that stamp of approval has been given to the ED, the CBI and the investigative agencies. But what about the concerns or apprehensions which I guess will still remain as far as opposition parties goes? Okay, before I just going to come across, let me just get in a quick reaction. Let's listen in to Mr. JP Nadda, the BJP president.
कुत्सित प्रयास है यह इस देश में चलने वाला नहीं देश कानून से चलता है देश नियमों से चलता है और नियम सबके लिए बराबर है और नियम का कानून का जवाब देना ये सबकी जिम्मेवारी है मुझे लगता है कि कांग्रेस पार्टी और ये परिवार इनको नियम के अनुसार चलना चाहिए और कानून का जवाब देना चाहिए कानून में सारे प्रावधान हैं
So the Congress party is taken to the streets basically protesting against Sonia Gandhi and saying that your government is misusing agencies.
No, how we have been misusing the agencies? You know how ED has been working and how lakhs of crore of rupees have been recovered by ED itself and by other agencies. इन्होंने देश के लिए काम किया है और कोई भी एजेंसी कोई भी काम करती है वो कानून के दायरे में करती है और किसी भी एजेंसी की बात किसी को पसंद नहीं है तो उसके लिए कानून के दरवाजे खुले हैं वन शुड टेक द लीगल कोर्स ऑफ एक्शन और सड़कों पर आना यह कहीं न कहीं अपना कानूनी पक्ष को दर्शाता है और कानून में लड़ने में कमजोर महसूस करने की बात है
Sir, one bite in English on the court verdict that has come out as far as PMLA is concerned.
No, court has just now upheld the PMLA and the ED's jurisdiction and the Supreme Court has said very clearly that they have that jurisdiction and PMLA is within the ambit of the legal ambit in which it is working. It has been upheld by Supreme Court and we should respect the Constitution, we should respect the law and we should respect the law of the land.
Sir, also one question.
Thank you.